Oh, they've done it! Simon Terodde, an instant hero! Can you believe this? Plenty attacking! No! The comeback is complete! A stunning second half from Schalke!
Blau und Weiß sein Leben lang. Herzlich willkommen zurück auf Schalke America. I'm your host, Richard Carmen. Joining me on for the season finale, season review, season wrap-up, Jack Mangan. Jack, how are we doing?
It feels like a reunion of sorts. I feel like the last two pieces of Schalke America content that have gone out have been, either of us solo and not together. But here we are for the finale, as we typically would be. I'm doing well. I'm doing well, sir. Obviously not the end result that we wanted, but certainly not one that was unforeseen or unpredictable. It's just time to kind of regroup this summer and hopefully we can put together a squad that can once again compete for promotion, and we don't kind of pull a Hamburg in terms of how long they've been down and unable to get back up. We were fortunate to get back up as quickly as we did. Certainly not guaranteed that we're going to repeat that. So that's just kind of my main hope. But I think my main message was just that we said coming into the season, not take it for granted, because our club might not be stable for a while, and having been relegated made me appreciate being in the Bundesliga all that more. So my thing was just enjoy it as a fan this season and enjoy the ride, and I did. I think it was a fun season overall, despite how bad it was at times. I think there was quite a bit of a roller coaster at the end, and it's all part of what makes the sport that we love.
Absolutely, 100%. I couldn't agree more. I got a lot to get into tonight. We're going to get into that and our thoughts on how this Fighting League is going to turn out for us next season. Rundown of the show. We're going to talk about the overall season review tonight. Best formation. What's our best 11 from this year? Talk a little Kramer versus Rice. Mentality, tactics, that kind of thing. Who was our poorest performer? Who was our best performer? Hopes for next season, and then our final thoughts as we wrap this one up. Shout out to Eric, who's in the chat right now, not only for being in the chat and joining us in the stream, but he wrote an article on schalkeamerica.com. Go check it out. We'll retweet the blog once again, but he gave his perspective, the brighter side of times when things were going better, right? When the 4-4 game against in the Riviera Derby back in 2017. So go read that article. It brought me back to when I remember that game was, and so just reading his article and reading his how he was reacting as the goals were coming in throughout that game kind of brought me back to where I was. So shout out to them. Shout out to everyone who joined us on the live stream last Saturday, reacting after the Leipzig debacle and season debacle that was. We chatted for like an hour, which was great. And the main talking point, Jack, was where's Jack? But you're back in our lives, so all is well now. As you said, we're back together again, so the gang is back. So a lot to get into tonight. Obviously, overall, the season was not good, right? We got relegated, straight relegated. Real quick on the two relegation playoff games that happened. First, the Bundesliga, Zweite Liga relegation game between Stuttgart and Hamburg. Stuttgart were victorious in both legs, really. So they will stay in the Bundesliga. Hamburg will be in the Zweite Liga with us. And then the other relegation game, it's all but done already after one leg. Zweite Liga team, Arminia Bielefeld, remember them? They're down 4-0 to third division Wien Wiesbaden. Not a good result for them. It was a shit show of a game for Bielefeld and their supporters, but that's pretty much all but done there. So we're looking to see Wiesbaden and Hamburg next year in the Zweite Liga. So
here's a question for you since we're on this topic. How do you feel about the current structure of the playoff system in the German pyramid? And would you prefer to see either sort of a straight 3 up, 3 down, or perhaps something more like the English model where it's a straight 3 down from the top division, but then you have, a third through sixth place are in sort of like a 2-stage playoff for the final promotion spot? Because that way you don't have a situation where you have, a squad that's usually a Bundesliga squad, which more often than not is going to have better players and a much better chance of winning, going up and being victorious against these second division squads. And this team like Hamburg right now, which has had a great season, they're getting punished for having a great season, and Stuttgart is getting rewarded for having a poor season. Thoughts? Do you like the current system, or would you, perhaps, like I said, move to like one of like the English models or something along those lines?
Yeah, the English model and the Serie A model are very similar, where the bottom three go down, and then there's a playoff with the bottom 6, 7 teams to get promoted. Um, I don't really like that system. I think it gives too many teams that are middle to average teams in the second division a chance to move up, and then they get slaughtered potentially in the first division. I love what they do in Germany, because I think, I love seeing like a 16 place team versus the third best team in the Zweite Liga. I agree. The Bundesliga teams typically prevail, but we've seen some crazy things, right? Union Berlin, they came through not too long ago. Now they're Champions League team. So we've seen some crazy things. You really do have to earn it to get back up. Um, I think it's a great way to do it, honestly, and I think also I was happy to see that the same thing happens with the Zweite Liga and Dritte Liga, where the same rules came into play, and we see the result there, right? The third division team stomping the second division team, which Bielefeld is just a shit show as it is. But yeah, I kind of like that model. How about you? What are your thoughts on the?
Yeah, I go back and forth. I don't know. There's times where I kind of like the German model, because it feels like part of the brand, and I guess the traditional something like kind of just likes, the history of that.
Right.
And I do. I mean, I obviously agree with your point. Like, we've seen Union Berlin prevail and come up, and now look at them. They're going to be in the Champions League next season. It's an incredible story on their part. And as you just mentioned, the playoff that's going on, in the Dritte Liga and the Zweite Liga, as well. But then I also, like I said, see the argument, with a team like, Hamburg right now that's been stuck in the second division for a long time. They have a very good season in the second division. Yeah. And ultimately, a team like Stuttgart, which has played poorly, is staying up. So I see that argument as well. The English model, I don't know. I see that both ways as well. These are things that are complicated. There's trade-offs in any system you go for. Part of me likes the multi-stage playoff in the championship, through which my Hatters, Go Luton Town, have just prevailed.
Nice.
But I also, like, you see your point. We feel like there's teams that are like borderline mid-table, even though the championship is pretty deep. But you know what I mean, like that ultimately get kind of like that chance. So I don't know, but I think it may become more of a discussion point as time goes on, if particularly in the Bundesliga and Zweite Bundesliga level, it keeps balancing out in the direction of the Bundesliga.
Yeah, and I guess if things were to change, I would prefer to see the bottom three go down and the top three in the second division go up, rather than like an extended playoff like we see in Serie A and in EPL. But it's interesting.
I think that's fair too, because I think in the Bundesliga, I think the second division, the mid-table teams are probably, I think, relatively worse than they are in the championship. I think probably 4th through 6th in the championship is probably better than that level in the Zweite Bundesliga. So I agree.
Yeah, no, 100% there. But yeah, so it's gonna be interesting to see how it shapes up next year. Again, Zweite Liga is a daunting league, as is the championship in England, since you're talking about that. But we will be in the second division next year for sure. Hopefully, as someone mentioned in the chat, we get more wins next year than we did this year, hopefully, because otherwise we'll be in a Bielefeld situation. But the season was not that great overall. Obviously, it started out in poor fashion. Many questions were raised with the hiring of Franky Kramer in the summertime, coming off of the promotion from the second division. Not many people's first selection. I don't even think it was Rovin Schroeder's first selection, honestly. I think Thomas Rice was, honestly. But they went with Franky Kramer. We always talk about preseason really means nothing, and we really saw nothing from them in the preseason last year. And some season we always feel optimistic, but last year I think you mentioned a couple of times, like, there's really nothing right home about in preseason to get really excited for going into the second division. We had some games against, I think it was Wolfsburg or Werder in a preseason, and we didn't look that great, I think. But yeah, going into the season, Kramer and company just did not perform at all, and it put us in a hole from the beginning, Jack. Not the ideal way. We said if we're gonna get any chance in the first division, we had to start off hot, and we did not.
Yeah, that's true. And I agree. I mean, I think it was out there that Thomas Rice was the person that we were going after, and we were trying to secure his services, and we were unable to do that. And so Kramer was sort of a fallback option. I don't think anyone was particularly excited about Kramer. I know you and I weren't on the podcast. We did not like that hire and did not think that. I mean, that's the thing, is like, we knew going into the season that the strength of the squad was not great for a Bundesliga level. So you at least need, a pretty competent manager to be able to try to get the most out of that squad and set you up, with competitive game plans. And I think when we saw Kramer, we're like, it's unlikely that he's going to be the person that makes the difference. You know what I mean? It's going to have to be the players making the difference, and you're hoping that the management is just kind of like at least competent. Look, we had some moments early in the season where things looked okay, or we got, lucky results. The Gladbach draw 2-2 kind of comes to mind, things along those lines. But you also saw early in the season symptoms of what would be kind of the story of the season, massive defensive performances, the 6-1, against Union Berlin. Yeah. And also a number of mistakes from Alexander Schrolla, which is another thing that plagued us this season. I think he had mistakes. I think against Cologne and Gladbach, very early in the season, almost identical things. I know he made a mistake in the first half of the season against Hertha Berlin as well.
The game, yeah.
And then of course mistakes down the stretch when he ultimately stepped back in for Ralph Fairman. So a lot of signs early on that things were not going to go well.
Yeah, and it was rocky. I mean, obviously we got the opening loss to the Cologne was it was a refereeing terrible display by them, I think, in that game. Drexler got a red card right away early in the game for nothing. But we got the draw against Gladbach and the Wolfsburg, big defeat against Union Berlin. Stuttgart we drew, one against Bochum, lost the River Derby, and then we had 4 or 5 losses in a row. What was it? Augsburg, Leverkusen, Hoffenheim killed us. I forgot to kill us. They beat us in the Pokal as well. And then losing to Hertha, Freiburg, and then I think losing to Werder was the tipping point for Kramer. Finally, it was 5, 6 losses in a row, and finally they pulled the plug on him. Brought in Thomas Reis. 2 games to go before the end of the winter break, which is the World Cup break. We had games against Mainz where we won that game, the first game, and then lost to Bayern in a decent game, 2-0. I mean, as good a decent game as we can have against Bayern. But 9 points the first half of the season. At that point, we were like, ooh, this is going to be a hard season.
Yeah, I mean, so under Kramer, I think we were conceding more than 2 goals per game.
Yeah.
And scoring 1 goal per game, essentially. And that's obviously not a recipe that's going to work for you. It just wasn't working. And it was sliding quickly. And they obviously wanted to make a change before the break. So, I mean, Thomas Reis came in before that huge World Cup break with not a lot of time. And then there's the winter break and everything. So I think it took him a while to get his feet under him, but then you get a couple signings in the second half of the season in Morris Jens, for example, and you get Fairman sliding back into goal and some other kind of bit players here and there to kind of flesh out the squad. And then, you saw Thomas Reis kind of settle down the defense. That obviously came undone later in the season. But we had a period of time there where everyone was healthy. Where we really kind of got cooking. And I think we saw probably the most consistent run of the season was under Thomas Reis, and that was something that he achieved for us, which I think shows that he made a difference. And obviously his goals per game and everything were slightly better on the defensive end and calmed us down.
Yeah, 100%. And I think Thomas Reis came in couple days before the Werder Bremen match, and we lost that game. It was only 2-1 at that point. We're like, oh, we did pretty well. And then after a full week, we had against Mainz, so we beat them. So I mean, I think he immediately turned the team around, and we saw the second half of the season kind of start off well. I mean, obviously the first couple games, right? Eintracht losing that 3-0 wasn't great, and Leipzig 6-1. We're like, oh, here we go again. But then we got a bunch of draws in a row, and 4 draws in a row, right? We also drew Cologne, Gladbach, Wolfsburg, and Union Berlin. Which is a great result considering we lost 6-1 in the first half of the season. Then we won against Stuttgart. And so we won, 8 games?
8 games unbeaten. And that included, 2 wins, I think, against Stuttgart and Bochum. So, pretty ridiculous stretch there. And then, the following stretch was very up and down, but it was still 3 wins from 6, which was, decent points because we needed to start picking up 3 points here and there. And, 3 wins from 6 is, essentially better than just getting 5 draws in a row. You know what I'm saying? So, it makes a difference pretty quickly for you.
And it's funny you brought that up because I think, even when we had that 8-game unbeaten streak, you're looking at the standings and we're still way behind everybody. And we're like, geez, the team is going on this fantastic run. We're probably one of the better runs of the season.
So frustrating, right?
Yeah. And it's like, oh, how bad did we do in the first half? And it was really bad, obviously. You said up and down and stuff like that, but then we knew there was a gauntlet awaiting us at the end of the season. But before that, there were winnable games that we had to have. And I think there's 3 teams in a row that we had to get wins against them. We said we had to get 9 points. And we only won, 1, maybe 2 of those games before the gauntlets. We beat Werder Bremen, lost to Freiburg. What was the 3 games? Here we go. Augsburg drew. Hoffenheim lost. Hertha won.
Yeah, the Hoffenheim game I think was tough because that was obviously something that we were kind of in contention with there, and that performance in particular was just really poor. That was one of our. It was only a 2-0 loss, but I think in terms of that was one of the most disappointing performances of the season. We just had nothing to offer in that game, so it felt like a huge missed opportunity. It'd be one thing if we were more soundly beaten in a game where we had a lot of effort, but we just felt like we just kind of didn't show up for that one for some reason, which was odd. Luckily we rebounded with that that win against Hertha. The Freiburg game, Freiburg absolutely smoked us this season. I think it was 7-0 something on aggregate. So not worried about that. The Werder Bremen game, wasn't that one of the craziest games of the season?
It was.
If I remember correctly, it was the late Drexler goal, the over the top chip from Salazar in stoppage time. Huge result there. The Mainz game, we followed it up with another huge result. That was another stoppage time winner via the VAR decision, if I remember correctly. So back to back, just huge things, and then that put us at least in position to have a chance. But it was the final 3 games that we talked about was Frankfurt in the middle of that, which is still a tough matchup, and then it's bookended by Bayern and Leipzig, which we essentially knew were going to be very lopsided results, which it proved to be. Frankfurt, we had a chance in that game. Unfortunately, mistakes from Schwalov and couldn't get it over the line and slipped through our fingers there. But like we said, Thomas Reis, I forget what the actual stat ended up being, but second half of the season, Schalke was somewhere around mid-table. If you only looked at if you only looked at the Rückrunde. So you have to wonder, if Rovan Schroeder had gotten his man from the beginning, would that have made the difference? Would we have picked up a few more points in the first half of the season and been in a better position? But at the same time, we dropped points under Rice too. You look at games even the Revere Derby, could have won that, and failed to and stuff. And so there's moments where you look back and we saw that we missed opportunities. But the thing is, I think we had a good effort all through from the squad. For the most part, like I said, except for that Hoffenheim game, maybe I think the main thing the Schalke supporters always care about is just that they feel like the team is invested, and trying their best for the club. And I feel like you can say that the team did that in the second half of the season. I think the connection was still there between the team and the fans. Which shows it's not just like the fans aren't going to necessarily turn on you if you play poorly. But as long as they feel that the connection is there and everything, I think that's the case. And I think you're seeing that with, the contract extension of Tirada, for example, stuff like that, in terms of us being able to retain players in that situation. So, although I'm sure there's an angle from his perspective too, anyway, the general point stands. Continue. Sorry, I'll stop for the moment.
Eric's comment is funny. It's like, when the reigning Europa League champions is the easiest game of the 3 you have, it's a tough schedule, right? And that was true, but it certainly has ups and downs. Missed opportunities, I think, is the theme of this season for sure. Obviously the horrible start, but then we had our chance. There was games at the second half of the season where we should have done a lot better. We were 8th best team in the Rückrunde, but we missed some huge opportunities. Frankfurt's one of them, and the Dortmund game is another one too. But there's so many in the second half of the season, and so Thomas Reis certainly is the man compared to Frank Kramer, but he's not without fault. It's not like he was manager of the season had they survived or anything like that. There were still some areas where he was lacking, I think. Well, let's stick with those 2 managers before we get to the best formation and stuff like that. I think there's a big difference between Kramer and Rice, both from a mentality aspect and a tactics aspect. Mentality-wise, let's start with that. Mentality-wise, I think it just seemed that the team didn't have that same hunger, right? The big difference between getting relegated this year and then 2 years ago was, like you said, we fought the whole way through. At the end, the crowd was still with us because we tried it. We tried hard. The last time, it looked like we gave up from midpoint of the season after that Gladbach draw there or win, and the crowd was against us for that reason. Or for us, we were against the team for that reason. But we showed a lot more fight this season, and I think the way the season started, it was eerily similar to that first time we got relegated because there's no hunger on the team, there's no push, there's no nothing really, and the play on the field showed it. We gave up goals left and right. We had leaky defense. Where Kramer was supposed to be the first thing supposed to fix the defense, he couldn't do that, and it just mentality wise, the team didn't seem to have it at the start of the season.
Yeah, I think it felt as though the team was playing scared more under Kramer.
Yeah.
Like they were going into matches kind of sketched out and like trying not to lose. And it definitely felt like, and partially that's just because the situation they got themselves into where they kind of had nothing to lose at that point anyway. So I think Rice was able to capitalize on that. But I think Rice was able to go in there and basically say like, hey, like we're the hunters. Like,
Yeah.
we're playing with house money at this point. Like we're going down if we don't change anything. So like, let's just go out there and like play with confidence and take it to people and see what we can do. And I think that mentality served us very well in the second half. Like you rarely felt as though we were playing scared or playing not to lose. Like we were going after people and trying to force things. We just weren't good enough to often do it. But you felt like the approach was correct in most of the game, in terms of the mentality and that kind of thing.
And that's a huge point too, because just look at Werder Bremen. They came up with us last year, right? And the two mentalities of the team between Werder Bremen and Kramer's mentality with Schalke was Werder Bremen said, we're not going to change anything from last year. We're going to attack. We're going to play the way we played and see where it gets us. And it served them really well in the first half of the season. They were one of the top half teams in the first half of the season. I think they were 8th at the midway point. Meanwhile, Schalke, like you said, just playing defensively, scared, didn't want to give up like 1,000 goals a game, and it showed. And I think, I would argue, and with Nicholas Fulkrug notwithstanding, right? I think that the teams were fairly level in terms of quality, but the mentality was a huge thing, and they were going for it, and we were just playing. Let's not give up a million goals and see where it gets us. Play for draws basically. And Werder, I mean, they had a great win against Dortmund with 3-2, down 2-1 within the 90th minute, and they found a way to win that game. They did. That's the kind of stuff they were doing in the first half of the season. That mentality was completely wrong under Kramer, and Rice, to your point, did change that thing around and became the hunter, like you said.
I would give Werder Bremen's squad a little bit more credit than that. I think they clearly have a better squad than we do. If you wanted Marvin Dux,
Dux is fantastic.
Pavlenka, Mitchell Weiser, anybody. But anyway, I think we saw what we can on that point. But I do think that Rice deserves some credit. It's not like he like fixed everything. It's not that we suddenly became great offensively. I don't think we were much better offensively than we were under Frank Kramer. I just think he was able to calm things down defensively and really stop the bleeding and gave us at least a platform to try to attack at the end of the season, which is kind of what we needed.
And I think tactic wise, we didn't. Not only were we just playing scared, we had no real formation, or we weren't sure what we're trying to do. We kept moving things around. Rice came in, and it was automatically at 4-2-3-1. Granted, having pieces like Moritz Jens come in the second half of the season, and then Michel Frey helped a lot, right? Kazuki, first half of the season, we had this guy who was looked like a gem, and then he got injured, and we hadn't seen him again after that. Maybe that was the only bright spot that could have been for Kramer under his reign. I think this tactic-wise, we were a lot more in sync, not only defensively, like you said, but also offensively. Started creating a little bit more opportunity. We sounded like we had an idea. We want to go direct at times, or we tried different ways. Versus Kramer, it was just like, let's just throw shit at the wall and see if it sticks.
It's funny that you mentioned Kazuki. There's so many players like that you can forget about, even being a part of this campaign.
I forgot about him. Yeah, I did forget about him. Wow.
Like example, when I was looking at sort of some of the best goals that we scored this season, right? Like one of those I think is a volley that Mole had.
Yeah, that's true.
Remember him? Like he was on this team at some point this season. Like
didn't Tobias Moore have a great goal this year too? I think at one point early on.
I forget if Moore did, but that's kind of the point. Is like there were that many random contributors over, and it felt like we just didn't always have a settled starting 11, and we were trying to find lone players or whoever to just kind of plug in to get a Bundesliga worthy starting 11 for most of the season with the injuries we kept having. Vandenberg comes in, he's out immediately. So to give Kramer a little bit of relief, not that he necessarily deserves much. He wasn't given a lot to work with to begin with. And then that was diminished throughout the course of his tenure as well. So, tough circumstances for both managers, but we hope that we can bounce back up and give it another go in short order.
Yeah, I certainly hope we can too. It was an interesting season to say the least. It's hard to say what our best formation was this year. I guess we can. What we saw in the second half of the season was certainly the way to go,
doesn't it have to be a 4-2-3-1? Isn't
it?
Has
to be. It has
almost
to be.
Exclusively what we were going. I think Kramer played that for at least probably half of his games as well.
Yeah. I think the goal. So last year, It wasn't last year. It was the year before. The year we get relegated, Fairman just was a mess of himself. He was making errors left and right, and he wasn't the answer. And then last year, obviously, Franz started majority of the games, and we obviously got promoted. And we were going to keep him anyway because he wasn't that good. We had Schwoloff, who had some promising signs prior to Schalke, and we're like, okay, well, he's got to be can't be worse than Frazel. I guess he was, but he was doing really poor to see. He played most of the season, but I think once Fairman came back, you were like, oh, this is night and day difference, I think, between the two. Obviously, Fairman brings an emotional aspect to it, being the club captain, but he has to be the starting goalkeeper, right? You're not going to put Schwoloff in there before Fairman, right?
Oh yeah, no, certainly not. I think Schwoloff was well below Bundesliga level this season. And I think that was probably anticipated going in, is that there wasn't too much to be expected. It's just a tough position because Fairman had kind of declined a little bit. And so, obviously he didn't have a lot of confidence internally with the club. We loaned him out, for a period of time as well. But ultimately when he did get called upon this year, he came up big for the most part, limited his mistakes. Although, one thing I will say in defense of Schwolo real quick is, people talk about, the mistake he made right there at the end against like Frankfurt or whatever.
Yeah.
Like Fairman had mistakes that directly led to goals as well.
Yeah.
This season. So, I mean, like you can't point to that individual mistake by Schwolo and not point to other ones as well. But in general, Fairman much more solid and definitely deserves, and obviously the Schalke legend status that he's on his way to cementing.
Lord Fairman, absolutely. I think, there's some blessed guys this year that we were hoping to see, obviously like guys like Aiden, Çalhanoğlu, and whatever reason they didn't play or they got loaned out or whatever. We got to just hyping these young kids because they just don't seem to work out for us. We started hyping, I think, Schwoloff at the end, right? Free Schwoloff. Like really release him. But I think one guy who kind of cemented his position, we were, I think, both unsure of him at the beginning, but Brunner kind of stepped in and kind of solidified the position and made it a position his own. And wasn't necessarily flashy or anything, but he was consistent. That's what we were looking for, at least compared to what we had seen prior, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, obviously there are things in Aiden's game that we like. And we're obviously biased as Schalke supporters towards Knapp and Schmiede products. It's a part of our club that we're proud of and that we kind of identify with. So we're always going to be excited when they get integrated into the squad. And showed some promising signs last year, but ultimately this season he wasn't convincing, and we conceded that on various podcasts. I mean, he was not good enough in his opportunities this year, not ready for this level, I don't think. And Brunner was, he was the solid workman right back. Not that he never made mistakes, but generally speaking, it helped. When he was in games when we had like a solid center back pairing, he helped kind of round out that picture. Somewhat limited going forward, but a solid player this season overall.
Yeah. Now I'm gonna let you do the distinction of choosing the center back pairing, because I think we had three guys you could probably choose from. Obviously Yoshida, Vandenberg, Jens with his performance second half of the season. Maybe even Kaminsky for the one goal he had that off the free kick. But I mean, really those three guys, it's a tough call. How do you want to do that? Jens has got to be in it, right?
I mean, so yeah, Jens is in there. That's the one thing. He's absolutely in there. He was, Mercedes Jens, as you said, huge loan signing, a massive contributor to that 8-game unbeaten run under Rice the second half of the season. When Fairman came in, when Jens came in, suddenly, we settled down quite a bit at the back. And he was, pretty good in most areas of the game, pretty well-rounded player. The problem is, it's hard to pick Vandenberg because he had a couple bad performances when he initially joined. Although to be fair, he came in like on
one day rest or something.
Yeah, like immediately put in. But then he also became injured right away. So he missed the vast majority of the season. Yoshida was, by far the much more called upon player. So I think we kind of have to go with him. But Yoshida was just like all over the place. There were times where he seemed like relatively calm, steady in possession. And at least read the game decently. And there's times where it just looked like, he's showing his age and he just like can't focus at this much anymore because he's been playing for so long. He's playing for a shitty team, and it's just like he'll turn off and he'll make really silly mistakes where he's just not paying attention and not like following somebody or marking. I don't know. And obviously at this point, this is not his fault, but at this point in his career, he's not up for the level of the Bundesliga physically in terms of being able to compete with a lot of the athleticism that you see in this league. No. So he got exposed, consistently on that front.
So, going into the season, we thought left back position was going to be a lock after a fantastic, arguably close to MVP season, Ojan had last year in the Zweite Liga. did not turn out that well for him. And I think injury kind of hurt him in the beginning, but confidence just disappeared for him. Ornan was brought in to kind of be his backup, and he played a lot, but wasn't really impressive. Up until today, I thought he was 18 years old. This guy's 28 years old. So I'm like, what the hell? Like, completely with a baby face there. But Ornan played a good part of the season. I think a guy who came up at the end of the season, Lord Matriciani, the GOAT, he kind of stepped up. I mean, by default, he wins it because he was the better of the three. I don't know if necessarily he was great.
I wasn't sure if you were going to go with that, but I'm actually pleased you're picking that. Look, I don't think that Uranin was anything special. I don't think that Oweyan obviously had I think we'll talk about him later, probably potentially in terms of some of our more disappointing players or whatever. I think that Matriciani, for the role he played this season at various positions, deserves to get the shout for the left back position, which I don't think anyone can really lay claim to.
Yeah. Good run with the Japanese team. Yeah, Yoshida did pretty well. So where is he? I just lost him. There he is. All right, so insert him in there. All right, so I think the holding midfielders is probably the easy selection because I think Krall and Kraus, arguably the two best, most consistent. Kraus certainly was the most consistent guy this year. And Krall, to his credit, he started out very rocky, I think. Yellow card waiting to happen, but eventually he kind of calmed him down and became pretty consistent, I think. I'm glad we didn't mention Tobias Moore for the left back position there. But where is Kraus? I know he's here. He's here somewhere. He's evading me. Like he's going back to Leipzig already or whatever. So there he is. Oh man, there's Krall.
Yeah, I think it has to be those two guys for sure. I think they were overall probably two of our better players. I think Thomas Kraus in particular. Not that he didn't make mistakes here and there, but you know, he was huge and also, you know, emotionally important, you know, in terms of galvanizing, I think, the energy of the squad at times, with his Schalke supporter status, you know, having kind of a personal stake in the relegation fight as well as a professional one. I will give Donny Latza a shout out in the sense that I think towards the end of the season, in his cameo appearances, I felt like he actually did make a difference in possession, kind of pinging the ball around. He was able to kind of, I think, increase our tempo and sort of our accuracy, and he played some incisive passes at times. Although I think, once again, for the lion's share of his tenure here at Schalke of late, I think he's been pretty underwhelming. But I do think he kind of played some decent performances towards the end of the year.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think a shout out is something he deserves, for no doubt about it. He started off cold, but he came on and it got stronger and stronger. Kind of built upon last season. Last season he was okay as well. He wasn't anything lights out or anything. He had a nice goal against Isaac Owl last year. Nice header from who's that Norwegian player we had for like a hot minute. I think these two are the picks here. Now, you know, obviously it gets even crunchier here because, you know, look at the three attackers. I think Bolter is a no doubt about it. He's got to be he's the best player of the season, honestly, on the left wing side. Where the heck did he go? There he is. But you know, you got Drexler who's in the mix. Salazar, obviously, Kaminsky Karaman got in the mix at the end of the season. Skarka as well. I know you want to put in Tobias Moore in there. Who else we put here in the attacking trio there? You're on mute, Rook.
Sorry about that. I feel like I'm on a Microsoft Teams meeting at work. Wow. Yeah, you know. Anyway, I think it's kind of weird, and you may be playing somebody out of position, whatever. Yeah, I think Bolter obviously has to be in there. I think the other two attacking players, for me, Salazar has to be one of them, and I honestly think Drexler has to be the other one. I just think those are the two players that when I look at Salazar and Drexler, I think both started less than 50% of our matches, actually.
Yeah. Mostly for each other, though, right? Right.
Yeah. Like Salazar played like a slightly different, lesser role that he did, you know, in the second division last season. But I still think that like those are probably the two guys that made the difference more often than not. I don't think you can put Skarka in that lineup. Speaking of players you forget were on the team, Jordan Larson. You know, I don't think you can put him in the lineup, you know, despite his earlier season performance.
Kazuki is the unknown. I think if he had played a full season, potentially he would be this.
But he was the comet in the night sky. It was like you got excited about him the second you got excited about him. He was gone already.
I hope he saves us.
The weirdest story of all time. I hope. Yeah, who knows? But I hope he comes back. He could be a contributor in the second division for sure. You would think, but
for sure.
Yeah, who knows?
Yeah. And then, the hard question for us, we thought going into the season again, like, we thought Toronto with his 30 goals last year. No, we knew that he wasn't going to get 30 goals this year, but we hope that continuation of the team from last year, most of the solid core was still there. He was still going to be able to contribute. We didn't have any people really giving him the ball. Bolter did his thing. He came on like a ton of bricks in the second half of the season. He only had like 2-3 goals in the first half. Once Rice took over, he kind of built up his momentum. But Toronto, a guy who we expect to get a lot of goals this year. I think he ended up with 5 goals this year. You obviously had Michel Frey came on in the second half of the season, January. Karaman had a big goal against Dortmund in the Riviera Derby in the second leg. And then obviously Poulter, another guy who we expect at least maybe 10 goals from. Nobody got 10 goals other than Poulter. But he got 1 goal, maybe 2? So
Poulter had 2 goals and 3 assists. And Toronto had 5 goals, so it's kind of a toss up there in terms of overall involvement. Poulter doing that though in probably overall much more limited role than Toronto. Obviously, Toronto playing a lot of full or starting, not full 90s, but starting the games and Toronto and Poulter. Wow, not Poulter or Toronto. Poulter, much more of a a second half cameo type player.
So are you going Poulter over Toronto? Any consideration for Michel Frey? I think he came on very well, but he wasn't getting any goals for us.
Striker's got to score goals, in my opinion. So no.
Yeah.
Three assists. There were moments where he showed flashes where you could see why he had been successful at times elsewhere, but to me, not good enough. I don't think anyone was good enough. It's hard to pick anybody for that position. I think you could say Poulter. I think you could say Tirada just for the fact that Tirada is now becoming a fan favorite and somebody that like the fans are connected to.
Oh, well, my jersey's all backwards, but
that wasn't particularly helpful showing the front there, but what? It's the end of the season, folks.
It is the end of the season. It's the end of the season finale. You got to wrap it up. So this is our best 11 that we can pull up with from this season. 4-2-3-1. Interesting formation. With this lineup, who is your poorest performers? We probably spoke about a couple guys already, but with what we expected of them, how they performed in the season, who are your worst performers of the year?
Number one for me is Schwolow. Obviously, I think more than any other player, he negatively affected the team. I think you look at the number. I'd have to go through and see how many games where he had a mistake that directly resulted in a goal. How many times it actually directly affected the result? As opposed to like losing by a multiple goal margin or something like that. But I think if he had half as many of those mistakes, which isn't too much to ask from a goalie, that could have made the difference in us getting promoted or not. Not promoted, but staying up, or not. So I think Schwolow has to be number one on that list. For me, I would put Larson on that list as well. Just an absolute nothing, I think, in terms of an acquisition. Thomas Oweon is probably the most disappointing, one of our most important players last season. And funny enough, he actually assisted the first goal of the year. It was a set piece delivery. A nice Oweon set piece delivery on a free kick, I think, to Bolter potentially. And so you start off the season against Cologne saying, hey, business as usual. And then Thomas just disappeared. So I think he's on there. I think Tobias Moore as well, somebody that we, picked up and signed like a multi-year contract, and he just couldn't get into the lineup and on the field that often. I think he was pretty good in the final third when he got into it, but pretty poor in possession outside of the final third. And just below expectations. So those are kind of my main guys. Maybe Franky Kramer, if you want to throw the coach on the list as well. What are your thoughts in terms of poorest performers?
Eric seems to agree with you. Schwolow, Larson, Moore, and Oweon. And it's funny you took that perspective, right? You took which player affected the game the most in the negative aspect, and Schwolow certainly I think did that, because I would say 5 to 10 goals were directly negatively impacted by him, by poor performances. I was leaning towards most disappointing. Like I really didn't expect the world out of Schwolow. I expected Oweon, and I didn't expect Toronto to score 30 goals this year. We were hoping maybe 10 to 15, right?
Yeah.
But
I wasn't hoping for that. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, no, but I think for me, I thought one guy I could rely on going to this season was Thomas Oweon. And for whatever reason, whether it's injuries or unfavored by both managers, it just did not work out for him at all. And even the times that we did a decent run out there, he just didn't perform. Orton did better at times when he was there. Tobias Moore was arguably better than him, and certainly Matriciani. So that was my poorest performer. But Schwolow, if you can't disagree with that, I mean, he directly impacted us and lost points on several occasions. It wasn't just one or two. It was more than a handful.
And we'll say, I think there were some reports that Oyan was seeing like a sports psychologist and stuff. So, maybe he's going through some stuff, off pitch that could be contributing to that. But, I just think he was somebody that we were so confident, like, hey, there's not a lot that we're taking with us to the top flight. And what we are taking with us, we don't like a lot of it. But, Oyan, that's a guy whose game can translate to the top division. And it just didn't. So, huge disappointment there.
Another disappointment for me too, and again, this could have been management's decision, but what we saw last year, it was an improvement. Sorry, my dog shakes in the background. Now it threw me out. Someone who he had good performances in the second division. He had a great goal, that karate kick goal, right, last year. We had a lot of expectations on the right side before Brunner came in, and then he just never got a chance or didn't fit. The times he was in there, even in attack, he didn't do much. And so, hopefully we get to see him more next year. I mean, he obviously can do well in Fight the Liga. He did last year. So why not give him a try again? So if you assume he's not sold or something like that. So, Iden's another shout out I'm going to give out to all that. So, best performer, that's got to be Bolter, right? 11 goals and I don't know how many assists, but.
Yeah. The one thing I will say, though, is even though I do think it is Bolter, 7 of his 11 were penalty kicks. So. You know what I mean? That's just kind of a great conversion record for him, and he did some that got us results. So I'm not trying to criticize him for that. But when you're saying like, hey, 11 goals, it's not like he was going around scoring from open play in the Bundesliga. Like, he had 4 goals from non-penalty situations. So, and there were periods of the time of the season where he didn't look great either. But ultimately, I think down the stretch became clearly our best player and one of the only people that we can rely on.
Yeah, I think he had 8 goals down the stretch. Which is amazing. Most of them are penalties, but still huge times of games where he had to step up. He arguably had the goal of the season with that backheel flick. I forget what game that was. Maybe it was Hertha Berlin, but it was reminiscent of the same goal he did in the Fight the Liga.
Stuttgart, I want to say.
Maybe it was Stuttgart. The game winner against Stuttgart. So, but yeah, that's I would give an honorable mention to Tom Kraus. I thought he was Mr. Consistent. He was probably the most consistent of the team. While Bolter may have been the best player, I think Kraus is the most consistent over the whole season because he did play poor, but he was more in the games and contributing in the midfield more so than Bolter was up and down, I think.
Yeah, so my list is Bolter 1, Kraus 2, and in brackets I have consistency next to Kraus. So I think you and I are very much on the same page in terms of those picks. Yeah.
We should do podcasts together.
Yeah. Maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea. So totally in line. I think the next couple that I have are Jens, Brunner, and I like that. And Matriciani for effort once again. Not that he didn't get exposed at times, that he didn't have bad moments, but he also had some hugely clutch moments. It's like result saving moments where he was putting his body on the line. And once again, just somebody who would go into any position that was asked of him and put in a shift and lay it on the line. You look at, even that the Frankfurt game, I think it was the Frankfurt game at the end of the season when, Matriciani is absolutely gassed and he tracks down a ball in the corner, plays it to Tobias Moore, was able to whip it in for Polter for that goal. I mean, like plays like that, like where Matriciani is actually making a difference. I mean, you can say, hey, he's not Bundesliga level. Sure. Whatever. But like, I think he actually improved kind of over the course of the season. And I think every squad needs a player like him.
Yeah. Honestly. I think if half the players had the hustle that he has, I think our team would have been maybe a couple more points better. I think he definitely won the crowd over. No doubt about it. Obviously Fairman is because he's a legend, but Kraus certainly did with his performances. Salazar and Drexler at times too, with their defensive tracking back, even, Polter and Toronto tracking back, and certainly Bolter. So there's some guys in there to get honorable mention for sure, and I think Thomas Rice deserves a lot of credit for getting the team back mentality wise and playing the way we expect Schalke to play, hard-nosed football, and really trying to make it difficult for the opposition. We've been talking about 45 minutes here. We haven't talked one of the big elephants in the room this year. Rowan Schroeder, a guy who was a mastermind behind our promotion last year. There's a falling out, and part of it had to do probably with the hiring of Kramer, and then the whole Thomas Rice situation that came above. I don't know what happened there. We still don't know what happened there. But in the heat of the night, he's gone. Similar to what happened to Maldini in Milan today. But Rowan Schroeder just disappears. The guy who we thought was the one guy, at least we can count on him to kind of, if he's here, he's going to be the mastermind. We'll figure this out. But he disappeared all of a sudden, and it left everyone in shock when he left. And it was I think it was the same time when Rice got hired. I don't know if it was right before Rice got hired or just after, but that was just unbelievable when that happened. I mean, I know when I texted you, I think you messaged me, and I was like, what are you talking about? Like, it's just unreal. You don't really hear about these things that happen like that, but it did.
I think one of us said like April Fool's isn't until April.
Yeah.
So something along those lines. Yeah, it was weird how demoralizing that was.
Yeah.
Because we gave Schroeder so much credit with our title and our promotion last year. Once again, not that we didn't go on kind of a random run towards the end of the season on pure vibes from Buskins, but Schroeder did a pretty good job with very limited resources to put together a squad that was capable of competing, and we did compete last year.
Yeah.
And I think we were also, despite how poorly things were going with Franky Kramer, I think we were kind of banking on having another transfer window in the winter with Rovan Schroeder at the helm to potentially work some loan magic or something and get us, scout some good players, to maybe put us in a position to have a go of it in the second half of the season. Then when he left, we were like, what do we have to hold on to at the moment? We have injuries everywhere on the squad.
9 points.
Our team is not Bundesliga level. Our coach is not Bundesliga level. We no longer have like a sporting director. Like what is going to happen? And
we finally got a sporting director, by the way.
Yeah. And actually, what ended up happening is made some good loan signings the second half of the season and brought in Thomas Rice, and we actually did okay.
Yeah.
So, I think that was maybe a little bit premature on our part, but yeah, I think that goes to show like the impact that Schroeder had, how demoralizing it was when he left kind of abruptly as well.
Yeah, no, it certainly was. It was a huge impact to the team, no doubt about it. But Peter Knobel kind of stepped in and kind of took over duties for Rovan Schroeder, and it did eventually level itself out. We do finally have a new sporting director, a director of sport, or whatever you want to call it. There's the man right there, Andre Hegelman, previously as Schalke's chief scout. So I have high hopes for him. I mean, I don't know too much for him outside of the scouting realm. Obviously, he worked under Knobel, under Schroeder. He's thought of highly of the team, and he can scout players. But we'll see what we can do. I mean, we got to give the guy a chance, right? It's funny, some of the pictures that were initially coming out of him were like the least flattering pictures of him. They finally got one up there on Schalke's Twitter, a good one of him, but they were like him in a hoodie.
Look at those spectacles. He looks like a scout.
Yeah,
I love it.
Yeah. I'm about to play some Moneyball, just with the money that we have or don't have. All right. But yeah, moving on to next season. We're going to lose some players. Obviously, I think Boulter, one of our best players the last 2 seasons, he's going to be gone, I would imagine. Kral's already gone. He's the Union Berlin. Salazar is up in the air. I would imagine he's not going to stay. People want to say Cherlinov is coming back. Maybe not. Maurice Jens, we don't know about him. Yoshida, probably not, I would guess.
I would be so surprised if Cherlinov came now that we're in the second division. I mean, like, I think there was a chance if we stayed up. I would be shocked if he still came, but yeah, hey, hopefully.
And I hear there's a chance with Maurice Jens, maybe if he wants to play Fight TV Liga, we'll see. Brunner, I don't know about him. Kaminsky he re-signed up. But the big news, I think, was heading into the end of the season, Toronto came out and said, "I'm done. Our season's over. I'm gonna move on." And then it kind of was a gaffe on his part, right? When Schalke was officially eliminated, he comes out and says, "Oh, hey, I'll play for you guys." Right? I don't know how it came out, but he decided to stay with Schalke for another 3 years, possibly, if Schalke want him. And he said it was more of he thought the team was for sure going to stay up, so he wanted to just move on from Schalke. But now that they got relegated, he wants to help them get back up. So I'm happy to have him here. This is a comedy, really, to see that all happen.
Yeah, I think it could be a case of given his age and given the level of the Bundesliga. I think throughout the season he said, I can't do another season of this. Like it's just not going to work for me. So like if they stay up, I don't want to be here. But then we go down and he's like, hey, I set the all-time record for single season goals like 2 seasons ago. I'm not any younger, and Father Time is going to end my career at some point. But like I might be able to match 30 goals, but I don't know if I'm going to drop from like 30 to 0 in the space of like 2 or 3 seasons. Like so he may be able to pitch in 8-10 goals next year. potentially. You might get, if you get another striker to pitch in 8-10 goals, you know what I mean? Like then you can be in the conversation again. So, yeah, and I think they're also going to help him kind of get his coaching licenses and stuff. He's going to have sort of a hybrid role, sort of like playing if he's playing good, maybe not so much. And he's, they kind of value him as a locker room guy and a leader and an experienced player that can kind of set, maybe the example in terms of professional standards for the rest of the squad. So, valuable to retain him, I guess.
And it's funny because heading into the end of the season, we thought, well, Poulter already told us he was going to come back next year with us in the Zweite Liga. So we're like, okay, let Poulter lead the line, see what he can do. Because if he can get 10, 15 goals in the Bundesliga, he surely can get that in the Zweite Liga. And all of a sudden, Torda says, I'm coming back. And they're like, okay, who's going to start now? Is it going to be Poulter? Is it going to be Torda? Maybe both of them start. Then you also have to remember Marvin Pieringer. He's on he did decently at the start before he got injured in this Zweite Liga, and so you got 3 guys potentially now. I don't know if we're gonna keep Heringer, maybe, but
that's a great point to bring up too. Is like I think both you and I at the beginning of the season were like, why would we not retain his services for the Bundesliga?
Yeah,
like who are we bringing? We're not convinced that Torada's gonna be able to replicate that. Like I was so surprised that we loaned him out. But
one of the shocks I think for us,
and maybe he would have been terrible in the Bundesliga too. But like I don't know, I thought that was odd.
Yeah, and last year he did really well with teaming up with Cherlinov. So if we get Cherlinov, it might be a reason to bring back Peringer. But I've heard rumors that maybe Peringer will move on and maybe sell him for €2 million or something. We'll see. It's not that much, but I mean at this rate, any money is good money for Schalke. Poulter and Tortoli in the line. Maybe Poulter gets majority starts. I don't know. We'll have to, or maybe both of them start. Who knows? I mean, depends. Really, we don't know what the lineup's going to be going into next year. I've heard rumors about guys maybe coming in and out, but I think, and I don't know about you, I feel better going into the Zweite Liga this time around than I did the last time around. 1, we play a lot better going down the stretch than we did the last time around. 2, financially, we're in a better place. We're much more stable than we were then. And then 3, I think Thomas Rice and the management team, we know who the manager is next year. He did well for us in the second half of the season. If he can replicate that kind of same energy, we should be one of the front runners in the league next year. Again, we don't know what the team's going to look like, right? But I feel a lot better this time around than last time. And I know it's a Zweite League, it's a super league, and nothing's guaranteed. But I feel I'm in a better place now than I was then. How about you?
I agree with most of the arguments you just laid out. I don't feel better, and I have nothing to justify that with. I just have a bad feeling about this relegation, and I don't know why.
Okay.
Not trying to be a downer in the season, but like I just do not have. I don't know. I'm not as optimistic about bouncing right back up.
Okay.
And I guess I wasn't last time either, but I just felt like maybe there was more pressure on it to happen, and so you felt like it was somehow like in the cards or something. Given like the narrative of this like historic club, and I just don't feel like that in going into this. I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I hope it's the case that we, once again have another competitive season or in our, the sharp end of the table when it matters most.
I'm trying to pull up the teams for next year in the Zweite Liga, and that got me to the Polish league. I'm like, why am I looking at the Polish league all of a sudden here? But let me pull this up here so we can see this before we wrap this up. That's not what I wanted. It's the last game of the season, Jack, and can't keep things together. There we go. Oh, I just saw it. My goodness. So many windows up. See, it teaches me for getting windows up. There we go. All right. So we know Heidenheim and Darmstadt are moving up. Hamburg staying down with us. Dusseldorf, St. Pauli. I mean, some good teams, right? Paderborn, Karlsruhe. It's funny. Regensburg got relegated this year. They were one of the better teams when we were there last year, and it turns around so quickly. Nuremberg struggled this year.
They beat us like 4-1, like second game of the season or something, right? Like
they were good.
Yeah.
Singh had one of the nice goals in that game. I mean, every goal in that game was nice for them. But Holstein Kiel, Kaiserslautern, they're in Zweite Liga. Good to see them back there. It's going to be difficult. Hanover, Magdeburg, Greuther Fürth, Hans Rostock, Eintracht Braunschweig, and then coming up, I forget who's coming up for the Dritte Liga outside of Wien Wiesbaden. But there are 2 other teams that are coming up too. So it's going to be a double relegation for Armenia, but it's going to be a tough league. I feel better. In the Discord, we were chatting and saying that this group of Zweite Liga teams is not as impressive as the last go around. And I think maybe Eric's the one who said it, is like, I disagree. I think it's just maybe not as good, but it's pretty close. It's a tough league. I mean, you can argue the top 10. I mean, look how close it was between, the middle teams are all right packed in there. The top 6 teams are very close. It's gonna be tough. it's going to be tough next year. And we get to go to Hamburg twice, right? St. Pauli and Hamburg.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll see. I mean, what are your final thoughts now heading into next season? Obviously, you don't have a good feeling, but overall, again, where the season ended up and where we're going now, final thoughts.
I'd like to end on a more positive note than I just did a minute ago, and just try to walk some of our fans through some positive memories real quick with just shouting out a couple of our best goals of the season to perhaps go on YouTube and try to rewatch and remember some of the good times that we had in the Bundesliga. You mentioned one earlier, the Marius Bulter back heel from Salazar against Stuttgart. I think that was in the first half of the season. Salazar on the right-hand side of the pitch kind of whips across in, and Bulter running diagonally across the box in stride, just back heels, poetry in motion. Very nice. Salazar, that 2-2 against Gladbach, I believe it was first half of the season, had a kind of a long solo run and then long distance strike to the corner.
Big hopes for Salazar at that point.
Yep, exactly. 100%. That did not really, go the way we wanted either. But that was a really nice goal in the moment. The Salazar chip to Drexler to win in stoppage time. We shouted that one out earlier. That was a really important goal and a really nice play by both of those guys. And then I guess two more. The Bolter step over goal late against Mainz.
Yeah,
where he just got into the box and just kind of put the guy and then hey, not like a ridiculous goal, but nicely done. And then finally, I think it was the 1-0 win against Mainz in the first half of the season. Terada's goal. It was a ball that was kind of whipped from Krall through traffic to Terada. He takes one touch that's like a rainbow touch over the top of him, which then he takes a great second touch to set himself up. His third touch is a shot to the corner right as the goalkeeper is arriving. That was like 3 perfect touches from Terada. And
never again.
Yeah, exactly. But once again, just kind of flashback to like at his best, it's those moments where he's just like so decisive and so clinical.
And in spite of he was like that every time, it seemed like.
Yeah, exactly. So I just wanted to shout those out. So yeah, anyway, go on YouTube, watch some of those nicer goals. There's not that many to go through, so enjoy some of the better ones.
I'll give 2 other shouts. Tim Skarka had his own goal this season. It was beautiful long range bomb from outside the box, top corner against Hertha. And that was the first goal of the game, I think it was. And then that was like within the first couple minutes. And then also Kaminsky, I think in the same game, free kick, beautiful goal, just came out of nowhere. Because you're expecting, I think Drexler or whoever it was, Salazar to take the free kick. And Kaminsky, you're like, why is Kaminsky doing this? Oh, that's why. Okay.
Yeah.
So there was a couple shots there.
Little inside out action back to the far post.
Yeah, beautiful swerve on it too. Yeah. So yeah. So we'll see what happens next year. Hopefully get Kazuki back. I'd like to see what he can do. Like you said, I think he could tear up in the Zweite. So
Kazuki just like the chaos energy play. Just put him on the right wing and just let him run. Yeah. See what happens.
So all right, well, that'll wrap it up. 60 minutes. We got 60 minutes in here. Good. Oh, decent season. Interesting season for sure. Hopefully next year will be a lot more entertaining.
Hopefully we can watch the games.
I was just gonna say, hopefully we can find a way to watch the games, whether it's ESPN Plus somehow or some shoddy, Czech Republic link or something like that. But if you got ways to show it, let us know so we can go. We got VPNs, so we can figure it out. And we'll try to do live streams. Jack, we're gonna have to get fluent in German so we can at least listen to the German radio and do the watch alongs, right? So
9.
There you go. That's a step. That's a step forward. Yeah, it's 6 seasons come to an end, Jack. 6 seasons. It's been a while. Long run.
It is, yeah. 2017. Back to 2017. 6 seasons. It's crazy to actually think that we've been doing this for more than half a decade now.
Unreal.
Thank you to you once again for your partnership through another year of this, and all of the work that you do behind the scenes and the additional prep that you do before every podcast. I always say this to the people in the chat. Richard puts much more effort into this than I do. I just show up and talk for the most part.
Jack's
a lot of
voice.
the infrastructure is him. So credit where credit is due there. Much bigger time commitment. And then also obviously shout out to everyone in the chat who's participated and joined us on these live streams. It's been really enjoyable to do these live streams as opposed to kind of pre-recording the audio podcast before we get to interact with you all live. So we appreciate those of you that have hung out with us throughout the year and supported us together in this kind of emotional roller coaster journey as they're in a relegation season. It's always nice to have misery loves company right now in a different way, but so thanks for listening and thanks for following along, and we'll do it again next year.
Yeah, it's been a hell of a run, and season's come to an end. Just disclaimer, remember 2 years ago, Zweite Liga starts in July. July 28th is the first game of Zweite Liga, so mark the calendars, everyone. We'll be back, season 7. So thanks again. Echo the sentiments by Jack. Jack, obviously, thanks to you for sure, helping out immensely with all this stuff. Couldn't do it without you. And yeah, let's do it one more season, Jack. Where can our followers find you on social media?
At JM Mangan, JMMANGAN on Twitter.
Shout out to Matt and Eric there at the end. Angry Orchard. Well, maybe we have to keep it going. We might not have the Angry Tree anymore next year, but we'll try to do something again next year. You can follow me at R_KHARMAN. More importantly, follow us at Schalke America, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, all that stuff. Follow us at schalkeamerica.com. And if you're not doing so already, make sure you follow us on YouTube and subscribe and like on videos. Be much appreciated. We'll try to pop in here and there throughout the summer. If something breaks that we need to come and do another podcast or something, we'll show up. But for the most part, we're taking a nice little sabbatical, much deserved, I think, after this long season. So, Jack, it's been fun. Let's get it on out of here, sir. All right, everyone. Thank you. Enjoy the summer, and we'll catch you soon. Glück auf.